Okay, thanks, Jordan. So thanks everyone for coming out. I guess the easiest way to do this is I'll start off with like a brief summary, starting at high school, I guess, St. Mary's, and then I'll kind of just show you the progression through the timeline until the present day. So if we start off with high school, so as Jordan mentioned, I graduated from SMC. I started off at St. Basil's, and in high school, I guess that's really where I started to specialize my thought into where I wanted to go, like post-secondary wise. So my path is pretty linear compared to a lot of people. It's just kind of follows a chronological order. I know a lot of people tend to jump around until they find kind of what works best for them. So my path might be a little bit different than some of the stories you heard earlier in the week. So if we start off in high school, at first I wasn't too sure what I wanted to actually specialize in or do for a living. I actually really preferred science over business in the beginning. So I did like the AP science courses and all of that. And I thought that's where I was going to go into. Specifically like genetics. I really liked learning about how different animals like humans especially evolved, kind of the lineage behind that, and how they adapted or how we've adapted throughout the years to our environments. So I really thought I was going to specialize more in the science field, something to do with maybe genetics or physics. I really liked as well. So even today, like most of my personal reading and the things I'm interested outside of school or work, for example, is mainly still like that science-based stuff. But there's a little bit of kind of a discrepancy there between the interest I enjoyed and what I actually wanted to pursue long-term for a career. So that's where I started thinking about accounting. So accounting was something that I was interested in high school, but it wasn't like my best subject, and it wasn't my favorite subject either. But I did find it pretty interesting, and I saw that it was something that long-term could be rewarding. And say like in a high school accounting class, it's more just like, here's a fact scenario, do the journal entries, the debits and the credits, move on. But I was trying to kind of think long-term where those kind of data entry scenarios would be out of the way, and the job would be more kind of like that client-facing, relationship-based career. So in high school, the reason I made the jump from that science focus over to accounting or business was because two of my friends were also interested in accounting, and their parents were CPAs, and our basketball coach was also the accounting teacher. So I figured it was just like a perfect elective to take, and that's kind of what started me off there. So if we jump from there, I guess, so I decided to apply to accounting programs for post-secondary, and I think I applied to Western, Brock, Algoma, and a couple more, but I ended up deciding to stay at Algoma, and I'll go into that a little bit further here. I have the questions up that Jaden asked me to kind of focus on, so I'll cover those a little bit, kind of in the order that she sent those. So next, the question was, how was your experience at Algoma University? So overall, I really liked the experience at Algoma U. And I think it gave me some good opportunities to learn and develop as a person. So when I first came to Algoma U, I guess the first thing I kind of did that helped me out was I got a job in the registrar's office with Dave Marasco. So before that, I worked at Kumon. It's like it's kind of like a tutoring service for kids and stuff like that. So I was able to jump over from Kumon to Algoma U in the registrar's office with Dave. And then I kind of started a progression where like one thing led to another, kind of opportunity wise. So while I was working in the registrar's office with Dave, he was able to help me set up some opportunities to tutor and be TA of some like accounting, finance courses and stuff like that. And then during that time that I was studying at Algoma U and tutoring, things like that, I was able to make some connections through those different avenues. So I thought that was super helpful. It was like connections with students, but also with professors. So I think that's something that's super valuable. For example, at a bigger school, a professor might not even necessarily know you, but then at Algoma, since it's small and the professors really know you, they'll even kind of jump out and offer you job positions and stuff like that. So I think that's something cool that's happened a couple of times. Even just recently, the other day, for example, a professor messaged me on LinkedIn and said like, hey, we're looking for accounting students. Are you interested, or do you know anyone that's interested, kind of thing? So that's kind of cool how you could just go from taking a course with someone, and then since it's such a small environment, they can get to know you and kind of think of you down the road. So I think that, so as I mentioned earlier, that's a huge stepping stone, I think, and I think it's important to help you kind of get out of your comfort zone and take the next step towards what you want to do. So if I jump to the next question, it's what are you up to now? So right now, as Jordan kind of mentioned briefly, I'm studying my MBA CPA at the University of Windsor. So that's it's a 12-month program, but it basically combines the MBA and the CPA designation together. So it's pretty cool. It saves you about, I'd say, like 3 years, because individually those are each 2-year programs. So it combines them down into 12 months. And at the same time, I'm also working at BDO in the Sioux. And I see there's a couple people in here actually from the office right now. So if I cover the MBA CPA, so as I mentioned, that's going to help me progress super quick through the CPA. So next September, I'll be writing the CFE, hopefully. And then while at BDO, it's been, I think it's been a good experience to help me get some actual practical work experience and have some opportunities to apply the knowledge I've learned, kind of like the application of the actual textbook knowledge. And I'd say that a lot of times people try to tell you like get out and go network and stuff like that to get those kinds of opportunities. But I think right now, especially because we're dealing with COVID and you can't really go out and network, you have to kind of transition and think about the things you can do. So maybe some advice if you were in that position and you couldn't necessarily go to a ton of networking events or anything like that, I think some advice would be just to kind of pivot, put the networking slightly on hold or find a different way to do it for a little bit, and then focus on other things that you can work on now, especially because right now no one's really expecting you to go out in public and be as active out in public as they used to. So you could kind of take that as an opportunity rather than saying like, oh, I can't go out and network, so I'm just going to not network. You could do it online, or you could do other things like try to boost your average, take some other independent courses online or anything like that. If you were trying to look for sort of that traditional networking opportunity to find a job, but you couldn't find it because of COVID. So I'll talk a little bit more about that later, and I'll jump into the value of Algoma U and staying within Sault Ste. Marie. So I think for myself personally, the fact that I didn't have to leave the Sioux and spend a ton of money on things like rent, tuition, food was pretty awesome. So even if you don't consider tuition because you'd be paying that anywhere you go, even the things like staying home and not having to pay like $500, $600, $700 a month in rent and a couple $100 a month in food was awesome. So you can push that off to other things, invest it, or put it towards like the MBA program like I'm currently pursuing. But also, I'd say the more important value of kind of staying in Sault Ste. Marie or going to Algoma U is the connections that I was able to make. So if I went to Western, for example, I probably wouldn't have been able to like develop a professional relationship with the registrar, and the registrar wouldn't have been able to help me get like a TA position. And then that TA position wouldn't have led to me being able to join OBS and be the president. And then from OBS is where I kind of networked with some people from BDO. And that's how I actually got that job at BDO. So even just staying in Sault Ste. Marie, if we consider the BDO aspect, like a lot of my friends that went out of town for school and they worked at BDO in the Soo, they weren't available to work all the time because they were obviously away at school. But I think that was of tremendous value to me because since I was always in the Soo, whenever the partners needed somebody to work, I was always available and able to kind of go into the office and do work, whereas other people just physically couldn't because they were out of town at school. So it kind of led to me gaining some more work experience than I probably would have if I went somewhere else. So even if you're not from Sault Ste. Marie, I think there's still some important value that you can take away from it. If you were from out of town, like Toronto, GTA kind of thing, and you were to come to Algoma U, or even if you were just to study online at Algoma U, given like the current circumstances, I think it's a great opportunity to, I'd say, mainly slow down and focus on something more specific. Just because, as I mentioned, like I'm sure before, there's a lot more people kind of hounding you, a lot more things to get done. But now people generally have a lot more time just to kind of stay home and like social distance, not go out. So I think you can kind of leverage that if you're able to, obviously. It's a great opportunity. So you could do things like study for your GMAT, LSAT, MCAT, whatever you want to do. It gives you some time where you don't have to put off other obligations because society is expecting you to stay home. So that's just I guess some advice if you're coming to Sault Ste. Marie from out of town, or if you're studying at Algoma from out of town but you're just online. Since you have to, it kind of forces you to slow down a little bit, and then you can focus down on one thing a little bit more in depth than you might have been able to previously. And then in terms of value, the last one, attending Algoma University. So I think the big value with actually attending Algoma U, whether you're from the Soo or from out of town, is to make sure you take all the opportunities you can to go to the things like the conferences, like workshops and stuff like that, because that's where you meet a lot of the people that you're going to be using for reference letters for like MBA programs or any kind of things in the future. So I guess some notable ones from going to different workshops, conferences, and stuff that were offered by Algoma U and CPA. I was able to meet people like the VP of Pepsi, the CEOs of a couple different startups in Toronto and things like that. So I thought that's pretty cool. And it's awesome just to kind of build your network that way. I know even a couple of my friends made some connections at the CASE competition 2 years ago. And then they were able to leverage that down the road where they had an idea of starting up a company. And they were able just to message them on LinkedIn and say like, hey, I've got this idea. Are you someone that can help me kind of get the ball rolling? So that's pretty cool just because there's not as much competition at a smaller university. So you have a lot more opportunities in that aspect. So I guess that leads into guidance on life after graduation and potential career paths. So I don't have an awful lot of advice on this point just because my path is pretty linear. I would just say make sure you talk to people in the field. If you want to go into accounting, for example, talk to obviously accountants and people in the finance industry and try to have a chat with them to see what they like and what they don't like about it, to help you kind of figure out going in if it's something that you would actually want to do for the next 40 years or whatever. And even if you can't decide, for example, if you want to go into accounting or science, you could talk to people in each field and figure out what they like about it from a career aspect to see if it's maybe just something that you have an interest in as a hobby or something down the road, but not necessarily something that you want to pursue in terms of a career. And the same kind of goes for potential continuing education options. There's obviously endless options out there. But I would say one thing to also take note of is that it doesn't always have to be like a very formal continuing education option. So there's a lot of formal options out there like med school, MBA, anything like that. But you could also just graduate, say you have like a BBA degree from Algoma U, instead of doing that MBA or PhD or anything, you can always just keep a lookout for courses you can do on your own, kind of in your own time. Whether it's like a stock market course if you're interested in investing, or maybe if you want to be a real estate agent on the side and you do some courses for that, or even if it's just reading books, for example, that kind of help you kickstart a hobby that you want to do. I think those are all just as valuable as looking into those more straight-lined continuing education options. And I think the big reason for that is because I always try to do kind of a cost-benefit analysis. So with the MBA, for example, it's kind of like you have to consider if you want to spend all the money to get your MBA, if you want to spend 1, 2, maybe 3 years of your life, like just going to school, just doing that. And then you have to consider the payoff at the end. So like, how much is it actually going to benefit you, or is it going to benefit you at all? So I'd say before you take a look at any like continuing education options, keep that in mind. Keep in mind like, what's the benefit going to be to you at the end? And it doesn't have to be a purely quantitative benefit at the end. That's just kind of what I lean towards when I'm analyzing things. But even if it's something more qualitative and that's what you want to do, then it's totally up to you. So some tips for success. I think the biggest thing is just reflecting and figuring out like a solid plan of attack before you start anything. So that includes things like your coursework or even things outside of school. And what I think it comes down to is that like, you have to keep in mind that really anything you decide you want to do is possible, but not everything is possible. So what I mean by that is like, anything you decide to do, you can probably do it. I mean, like there's some exceptions, obviously. I'm never going to be like a NASCAR driver. I'm never going to be in the NBA. But generally, if you decide you want to do something, you could probably do it. But at the same time, you can't do everything. So you kind of have to take a step back and analyze and prioritize what you actually want to do, and just kind of drill down on a couple really specialized, like important topics, I'd say. So even with studying and things like that, it's probably not advantageous to go like read every single book, just like a super wide range of accounting books, for example. It's probably better to take a step back, analyze it, figure out what you need to know, and then drill down from there. I think there's a couple more questions here. Yeah, so how to get involved and network both within Algoma U and the community. So typically I'd say go to events, talk to your friends, see if they know of any events, reach out to people, go for a coffee or something. But obviously that's not really a possibility right now unless you're going to an event like this that's online. So I'd say instead of really focusing on networking super in depth right now, you can boost like the other side of your resume. So instead of boosting like the interpersonal side, maybe take some time to like boost your average, take some courses on the side or things like that. But obviously try to get involved and come to online events, because those are super beneficial as well. And even if it's just sending someone like a quick message on LinkedIn, a lot of times it's better just to take the chance and message them, because you never know if they'll be able to help you out. And then for like channels of support and resources, I'd say the biggest one is just reach out to your friends, and especially with like accounting, for example, if you're in the weeds of your tax course in like last semester of 4th year, the biggest help is just like kind of suffering through with your friends, and crack some jokes, and then it makes it a lot easier. And especially if they're in the same courses and stuff as you, then they probably understand what you're going through. So I think that's the biggest way to help.